I was running a hostel in Reading called Walter Rodney House for young homeless people, male and female. And then shortly after I started there, I found that there were other similar projects around the country, around being Leeds, around being Birmingham, um, uh, one in Liverpool, Bristol. So about half a dozen. And what I did arrange is for some of the residents to visit other residents, to visit other hostels, and the residents from wherever we went came to Walter Rodney. So it's both to expand the experience of the young homeless people and also the experience of the staff. So at the time, there were 3 housing associations that were registered with the Housing Corporation. And registration with the Housing Corporation was crucial if you're going to expand in terms of funding. So we had our first inaugural meeting in 1983. And from that meeting, we said that we want to start a federation, at that time, of black housing projects. And then, because we were all projects. And then Eugene came in and said, listen, we're not a project, we're an organization. So change the name. So we became the Federation of Black Housing Organization. And we had, at our first conference, we had 2 main objectives. One was to increase the number of black housing associations. And we were quite happy to get 25. And the other 2 was to increase the number of black people that were employed in housing. Because at that time, there were no black people working in housing association, very few working in local authorities. We talk about mid-1980s. So the first thing, we went to the Housing Corporation, and we had some really good people there. David Edmonds was the chief executive, and he bought our, our vision, lock, stock, and barrel, and it would not have happened without him. Anyway, but what really did it, that we invited him to one of our annual conferences, and the conference gave him so much pressure. Oh, and he invited a couple of his lieutenants, and they were, honestly, they battered them. They came away from that conference saying, we didn't realize the scale of the problem. And they instituted a policy to increase the number of black housing organizations. Now, we'd said 25 at our area conference, but when David Edmonds called, people said, we want at least 10% of the 2,000 housing associations. We want at least 200. And we got 120 within 8 years. Tremendous amount of money getting poured into the associations. 1 year, 50 million. We're talking here about 20 years ago. 50 million went to black associations. To the point that Eugene Housing Association could say that it was the largest voluntary organization, or the richest voluntary organization in Europe. They had assets of in the tens of millions. And then the other side of the coin was about increasing the number of black people employed in local authorities and housing associations. And Ray Wallace in Liverpool has started an organization called Merseyside Skills Training. And the project involved recruiting 12 people, black people, putting them in place into the housing association so they can learn the rudiments of housing management, and with the day release attached to that. And a year later, 12 black people were employed in local authorities in Liverpool, where previously there'd only been 3, including Ray Wallace. Wow. So I then decided, well, this is a good vehicle so I started an organization called Positive Action Training in Housing, PATH, and started one in London. That was very successful. Started one in Birmingham, Bristol, Leicester, Manchester, and one called PATH Local Authorities, which was involved the whole of the country. And within 7 years, 3,000 people had been added to the list of black people employed in housing. So, I mean, we didn't realize just what we'd achieved really at the time.
My job was to kind of develop the strategy and to monitor it and to work with the regions to deliver it. So that's what it was. So the second program, which was 91 to 96, I came along. I joined the corporation at the end of 1990 because there were two programs. You know, there was 86 to 91 and there was 91 to 96. So I came along at the end of 1990, did the review of the last program, of the 86 to 91 program. And of course, there'd been some significant changes, which meant that the direction of the program needed to change entirely. The focus changed from being the first 5 years was about promoting Black associations, so basically getting more Black associations registered with the corporation. The second 5 years was about consolidating them and making them strong. So the focus was, there was a much better, or different, I should say better, a different kind of focus on funding to ensure that they got the capital they needed and the revenue money they needed and the skills that they needed to ensure that at the end of the 5-year period, 96, they could be independent organisations, which is the reason why that second 5-year programme was called An Independent Future.
After the 96, when you went into the next phase, how was that framed?
Well, the next phase, I left after that, but before I left, we developed a new approach, which basically then was taking the focus off the development of Black housing associations. They were still important, but all of that that funding, you know, that targeted money and stock transfers and revenue, that stopped. They were obviously still going to be supported by the corporation, but the focus really changed to provide a greater focus on race equality generally. That it never did. Race equality was always on the agenda. It didn't go off the agenda, but basically it was about housing needs. It moved to more housing needs, Black and minority ethnic housing needs, and the whole housing sector meeting those needs, rather than it just being about Black associations. Because of course, one of the things that I think some people forget and it gets lost is that the Black housing, that those 10 years of positive action programs were not about Black housing need, actually, not really. You know, they were a response to Scarman. They were a response to the riots in 1981, 1985, and the Scarman report, or the specific aspect of the Scarman report that said that people needed to feel that they had a stake in their communities. So they were about empowering Black communities, empowering Black leaders, and actually enabling Black people to have control over resources and over assets, and to employ people. That's what it was really about, which is the reason why the Black Housing Association was defined by who was leading, who was controlling the organisation, which was, the definition was, if 85% of the board came from Black and minority ethnic group, that was a Black association. They were established, of course, they had to be, they were established in areas where Black housing need was most acute. That was very important, of course. So they were housing Black and minority ethnic people, but they were never expected to house only Black people. They couldn't have done that anyway. It wasn't legal to do it, and it wasn't their responsibility to do it. That's the responsibility of all housing providers. So the focus was about Black leadership, actually, and Black empowerment, and people forget that. That's what it was about.
Yeah, you know, when I was at FBHO, I was always very keen to engage with what's called, in quotes, the mainstream housing sector, because I think it's very important to, if you're talking about addressing issues of racism and race equality in housing, the fact of the matter is that the majority of Black and minority ethnic people are employed in what's called the mainstream housing sector, in quotes. And therefore, I think the leadership in that sector needed to address issues around race equality and continues to address issues on race equality. So I think cross-racial coalition building, whether it's institutional or at the community level, where I I'm particularly interested in is vital. And I mean, just because we had the success of the McPherson report in 1999 doesn't mean to say that racism has gone away. Racism is still very alive and needs to be addressed. I think actually, when I've written about this, I think the McPherson report was the high point of race equality, and since then we've had a slide to the present day. And yeah, I know that many people in the black-led housing sector feel this, but I think race and housing has got lost and become deprioritized in terms of policy issues, and it's really important to keep those issues alive and vital and mobilize around them.
Okay, so so obviously, you know, in recent years we've had the vote and referendum. You know, we're going towards, you know, whatever type of Brexit we're going to look at. We've had Grenfell, we've had Windrush. Where, you know, and obviously we've got the BME sector on all of its history. Where do you think it should be kind of like framing itself, or what pressure points should it be kind of like advocating on going forward?
Yeah, you know, I think all of those things you mentioned, Brexit, Grenfell, Windrush, shows the importance of race in public policy discourse. And therefore, I think, and also the other thing that we need to factor in is the rise in hate crime since Brexit as well. Now, all of those issues around advocacy, meeting the needs of low-income Black and minority ethnic communities in our big cities is really, really important. So I think what needs to happen is the black-led housing sector needs to modernise in terms of where we are, modernise in a very positive way, and understand that there is a space within race and politics for a strong advocacy organisation around race and housing, and then reflect around the people who lose out on good quality housing in larger cities. It's Black and minority ethnic communities, because those are the ones that are disproportionately poor, can't access housing, particularly not only established minority communities, but emerging minority communities as the UK becomes more global at a time when it's closing down itself down in terms of Brexit. So I think it's even more vital for black-led housing sector to focus in on advocacy around housing needs, to champion housing needs around poor and low-income Black and minority ethnic communities, to address the root causes of hate crime, and also understanding that local authorities, who back in 1997 were much better resourced than they are now, since 2008, since the crash in 2008, they've lost 40–50% of their funding, and that has an impact on how they, local authorities, address race equality. So I think champion the role of race in public policy, especially housing, is very, very important, and particularly in terms of Grenfell and Brexit. That gives two focal points in terms of the black-led housing sector to pitch in and focus on a number of public policy issues. And it actually, the specific role is keep the issues of race equality alive, because what we've had since, as I said, since the publication of the McPherson report, is a slide in terms of race equality. So therefore, it's very important for black-led housing organisations to continue to talk about race, discrimination, racism, exclusion through the lens of housing, but then broadening it out to other public policy issues. So I think there's a real moment, I think, for black-led housing associations to mobilise and put together a new manifesto going forward.